What were you doing the first 6 months before you were accepted into the TV writing program?
I was working on my baking business. I had developed a brochure of all like the different types of special things that I could do, and I was going to go out to some wedding fairs and try to drum up business doing favors for weddings. And I was in fact at the kitchen baking all day to go to a food show, came home and got the email saying, congratulations, you're a semifinalist for the CBS Writers Program. Please call and schedule your personal interview. So it was really like a crazy, like the universe was like, she's too good at the cookie thing. We gotta pivot back and put her where she belongs.
And so you rented a kitchen because that's how you could get it sort of permitted to do
Yeah,
the
yeah.
cooking.
It was long before there was any thought of, allowing people in LA County to bake from home or cook from home to sell it. And so, Pasadena has its own licensing requirements and all that. So I had to do all the research to figure all that stuff out, had to figure out how to get the right insurance. I mean, it was a lot, but, I toughed it out and figured it out and got my business up and running. And then Hollywood was like, nope, change of plans.
How many TV show scripts and pilots had you written before you were hired?
Oh, goodness. I think I have this officially written down somewhere. I want to say that I had written 12 specs and I had 4 pilots. And the last spec I wrote was for Person of Interest, and I finished it a few weeks before I got my first TV writing job. So it turned out to be the last one I ever had to write.
And how long, like how many pages are let's say, a normal spec?
Most specs most TV scripts in general, especially back then, range anywhere from 52 to 60 pages. You really want to try not to go over 60 because it's a big ask on the reading time. Nowadays, if you're on staff, some shows come in much shorter. Our scripts on S.W.A.T are 46 pages. So you have to be really, very specific about the word choice so you can get it all in, but also keep it to a minimum. But yeah, so anywhere from like 52, if it's a drama script. If it's a comedy script, it's usually right around 30-ish pages.
What key factors played a part in you being hired?
I think one of the big ones was my life experience. So I broke into television working in cop shows, and I had put myself through my undergraduate years working as a police dispatcher. And I would work graveyard shifts, and then I would get off at 7:45 in the morning, drive to school, go to school all day, come home and sleep, go back to work. And thankfully, I was allowed to do homework at my desk when nothing was happening. So it's the only way I got through it. And that experience was always appealing to people who make those kind of shows. And in broadcast television, as we know, those shows are very prevalent. And, I could talk about things that were real and that pertain to those stories. And so that was a big calling card for me, was being able to bring that real life professional experience in. It was also important that I was a Black woman, that I could speak to matters of, inequity for our characters that we were writing, that I could talk about what it's like to be a Black woman who's the only Black employee in a play, that I could talk about those things. And I was willing to share those stories in the room. And then, that I was prepared, that I had written and written and written and written and had built my muscle to the point that someone was like, okay, she's ready to do at least the basic part of this job. Because you will only get stronger and get better as you continue your career. But you have to, there's such a line between writing a decent script and writing a professional script. And it's really about the passion and the fluidity that you can put on the page, that it starts to feel a little cinematic, that they can picture it when they read it. And it's not just, she walks to the door. It's like, she walks to the door and it dwarfs her. And it's like you're conveying a real image with it. So you learn all that by writing and by sharing your work with other writers. The biggest mistake that I think newer writers make is wanting to hold all their scripts really close and not let other people read them. But you only get better when other people read it and say to you, I love this idea and this character's great. I got a little confused through here because I wasn't quite sure why the character was doing this or why we went to this place suddenly. And you take those notes and you go back and make it better. Because that is TV writing. That is the rest of your life. If you want to write TV, is people will give you notes. You will go make it changes. You will turn it back in. Even if you're the showrunner, the studio and the network get to give you notes. So you will take their notes. You will, unless you're one of those writers who declares you never take notes. But I do not know many of those.
Didn't know that existed. Yeah, okay.
Yes, there are some of them, and I'm like, okay, you do you. But I take good notes. I take good notes. Sometimes there are good notes.
What do you think is more common for a new writer in a TV room to want to hold back some of their work or want to hold back their personal experience and maybe not speak to what their life was because they don't want to offend other people in the room or make them uncomfortable?
Yeah, I think that they're kind of part and parcel of the same thing. I think new writers in a writer's room have to learn that balance of when do I speak, when do I not speak. And some of it's just literally the timing of it, right? Figuring out your window to say the thing you want to say, how to do it without cutting off another writer, how to do it without crapping on somebody else's pitch, even if you don't like it, right? But to be able to be like, hey, that might work. Also, what if we did blah, 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 so that you're not, sideswiping them. You're just saying, here's another idea. And internally you're like, because I don't like that idea. Or you're being additive, or you're inspired by what someone said. And you're like, oh my God, I love that. Also, could we add this to it? And then maybe it gets better. Or maybe your suggestion gets pushed to the side, but you made your suggestion. And a lot of new writers are very intimidated when they get to the writer's room. And it's a lot, especially if you are, say, on a broadcast show with like 10 other writers. I'd estimate 8 of those writers are pretty solidly experienced. And so it's just fast and furious of story pitches and this and that. And what if we did this? And great, let's have the character move here. And let's use this setting. And it starts to be overwhelming. And so the advice that I was given that I pass on to all new writers is try to say something you think is of value in the morning and something of value after lunch. In the beginning, that's all anybody's going to expect of you. In fact, they will be real impressed that they got those 2 things because you're a staff writer. And those people all understand that. They all know this is new to you. They all know you're trying to find your footing. So you don't have to come in and sit there in silence unless you have a showrunner who's told you that the staff writers are not supposed to speak, and it does happen. But in most rooms, you're so scared to speak that that's why you're not speaking. And so you need to find your voice and speak. You also need to be careful not to try to dominate the conversation and take over. You need to pick up on the social cues of when the showrunner's like, yeah, I don't know about that. And stop talking and let someone else pitch something. You may come back to your idea, but if you keep pushing, it's going to cause some friction in the room. So it's really learning that is the first several weeks for any staff writer, is trying to figure out how this all works. And when do I speak and when do I pull back? I'm a big proponent of having a notebook in front of you because as you have an idea, you can write it down. And if someone else is still talking, A, you won't forget it. And B, because you have it writing down, you're not panicked about getting it out. And if someone else pitches the same idea before you do, at least you can take comfort in the fact that you were on the right track. But it's also a lesson in, right, your idea was right, so you can pitch it. It's fine. And take the chance and pitch it. In terms of the personal stories, I think good writers' rooms foster an environment where writers feel safe to share their stories. And by good writers' rooms, I mean safe writers' rooms, places where the showrunner has said up front, this is not a place where we bully each other. This is not a place where I'm going to tolerate that kind of behavior. Everybody's opinion here matters. At the end of the day, I'm going to decide what we're doing. So you don't even need to fight about it because it's up to me. And that allows people to feel safe saying, I did have this experience when I was a kid where I got lost for a day and my because that's a vulnerable thing to talk about, right? But it may help the story. And you want your writers to feel safe to help build the best story. Toxic rooms where showrunners yell and scream at each other, nobody in that room is giving their best. Nobody is telling their best stories because they don't feel safe. And so to respond to that kind of behavior, everybody pulls back a little bit. And you should, because you need to protect yourself in that environment.